Hey everybody, it's Roberta Eastman at Home Buyers Inventory, and thank you for joining us today to answer the question or to discuss the controversial debate of renting to own versus renting a home. Renting a home versus renting to own is a hot topic that is always being debated. In this video, we're going to discuss the pros of having a rent-to-own home and the cons of renting. So when you're renting to own, you have a smart investment. Renting is typically money down the drain because that home is not yours, so all of that money is going into somebody else's pocket. When you have rent to own, you have loan down payments. When you're renting, you have first and last month's rent plus a pet deposit. So typically in our program for rent to own, when we are doing the down payment, which does go towards your purchase price, we actually call it a lease option, not a down payment. But the lease option, that goes towards your purchase price. So if you're going to be paying first month's, last month's rent and a pet deposit anyway, you might as well be putting that towards a lease option. And if you execute your option, at least you get that money that goes towards your purchase price of the home. So with the rent to own, again, our rent to owns, I'm not speaking for how everybody else does their rent to owns. I've actually heard horror stories on how others do rent to owns, and on the other hand, there may be some that are very good. I am just not aware of other people's rent to owns and how they do their programs, and whether or not they make sure that they have the exclusive language in the contracts that indicate you are the exclusive buyer of that property for whatever the term is. So renting to own, bad credit and no credit is usually okay, in our case anyway. The only thing we look for is evictions. In renting, you typically need a perfect credit score to be able to get into even an apartment. In our rent to own, you have a steady monthly rent. We actually guarantee your rent for the entire length of the term. When you are just renting, you are subject to soaring rental prices. And in the economy right now, that's what the investors are counting on, is the rental prices keep going up and up and up, and it's kind of like the electric company. And there's really not a whole lot that you can do about it. Rental prices, even if we have an economy slowdown, your rental prices typically stay the same. So it's very unlikely that you're ever going to get a break in your rent, as to where, again, on our rent to own, you have a steady monthly rent. On a rent to own, your home equity is building up. So over time, the house is appreciating. When you go to execute that option, you've got equity in that house, especially if you've done improvements to it using a professional and a contractor, and just like our agreements indicate you should. You've got equity that has built up over the time in which you're renting. When you are just doing a rental, there's no equity building up. Not for you anyway. It might be building up, but it's going into the landlord's pocket. And this next one, I don't know that it's necessarily 100%, but we hear it a lot. So when you do a rent to own, a place to call your home. That's what our tenant buyers tell us. And they tell us when they were renting, and we hear it a lot from even potential tenant buyers, when they're renting, they have a lack of sense of belonging. So if it's important for you to have some place that you want to feel like you can call your home because you own it, then rent to own is definitely the way for you to go. And I have a story on this. My parents rented their whole lives. And when my mother passed away, my father was left asking, now what do I do? Because he was renting. So he had no place to call his own. He bounced from kid to kid to kid. And then he passed away too. So he never had a place to call his own. And I think that was one of the regrets he had in his life. I know it certainly as his child, it was one of the regrets I had in my life for my parents. That's why we offer the rent to own, so that we can help people get into homes and they don't have to end up being like my dad. When you rent to own, it is a road to financial freedom. And again, there's many reasons why we would say that. Houses give you tax breaks. You have an asset when you get older that could be paid off. Renting, you're renting forever, like my parents did. Like I said, 32 years they rented the house that I grew up in. And at the end, they just didn't have that financial freedom. Here's one of the best parts, and we actually offer free budget decorating tips, but when you do a rent to own with us, or maybe some others, you have the freedom to decorate without any restrictions. The only thing we ask you not to do is don't change the roof line and don't take down a load-bearing wall, not on your own. Wait until you own it. And then when you rent, you often have landlord restriction and rules, and you can't personalize your space. Rent to own, pets are allowed, in ours anyway. And we do not charge a pet deposit. Your paperwork does indicate that if you have pets, that you will professionally take care of any damage if they have caused it. When you rent, usually or at a very high cost, but usually when you're renting, no pets are allowed. When you rent to own, you have that sense of stability and a better attachment with the community. Right? Your neighbors, you're renting the house, you're going to own it, and so you have that sense of community. When you rent, there's no stability. Download our infographic on rent to own versus renting at our website, www.homebuyersinventory.com.